Today on Rise and Thrive Conversations for Greatness, we're diving into the power behind our emotions, especially the ones we try to avoid. My guest is a telehealth counsellor, executive coach, and author who helps people transform their emotional pain into purpose and power. This is going to be great. With a PhD in counsellor education and supervision, his research explores the relationship between emotional intelligence, job satisfaction, and leadership impact. He's the author of iCubed, Unlock the Inner Strength Behind Your Negative Emotions, iCubed for Couples. We're going to dive into all the iCubed stuff as we go through the interview. His message is simple but profound. Our negative emotions aren't the enemy. They're indicators of what truly matters. His mission through his company, Becoming More, is to help individuals and organisations bridge the gap between who they are and who they're called to be by understanding their personality, emotional intelligence, and leadership purpose. Let's welcome to the show Dr. Greg Stewart.
Hello, John. Thank you, sir. And this is obviously my pleasure to be here. So thank you so much.
Well, Rise and Thrivers, Dr. Greg is coming from Texas. It's his evening now. Talking into the future, really, but it's just the way the sun and the earth works. I've really enjoyed researching for this interview, Greg. I'm loving everything that you're doing. We're going to get into the book. We're going to get into your company and emotional intelligence and all these great topics that our audience is going to love. I wanted to start, though, just by having our audience get to know you a little bit more before we get into all of that. And let's say myself or someone, we're at a party or we're at a kid's party, we're at a networking event, wherever we're at, and I bump into you and I go, "Oh, hi, I'm John." And you say, "Hi, I'm Greg." And I say, "Hey, Greg, what do you do with yourself?"
So, like I said, I am a full-time telehealth counselor, executive coach. I see about 40 clients a week. And I've had like a hodgepodge of careers. So pastor, executive coach, therapist. I have been a director of a residential treatment center. So, and even a pastor for 15 years. So it began a long time ago where I became a kid. Went to church like a lot of us did. And my parents were going to church, or I quit going to church. And then I did those proverbial party hardy teen years and then suffered the consequences from those years and then recommitted my life to Christ and landed back at the same church. I became a Christian. So I felt called in the ministry, spent a summer in South America, went to a Bible Institute for a year, but then the senior pastor asked me to be the youth pastor at that church. So back in the day in the 90s here, there was these adult programs that began for a lot of us who had like 160 credit hours, but no degree. And so it was like one night a week for a year. And so we did that. I was in organizational leadership. I liked it, but I wanted to get onto seminary and start my pastoral ministry. So, but my first semester in seminary, I took philosophy of counseling, John, and my eyes were open. It was like a defining moment. So I mapped out to do a master's degree. And in between those two degrees in the year 2000, I came across, there's like three things that happened, more defining moments, where the first thing was that I came across a book, Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. A lot of us are familiar with that book. And then I started teaching as an adjunct professor in all the organizational leadership courses I took and fell in love with leadership. And at the same time, I was underneath the leader. He was a great guy, but he just had some emotional struggles. So after I became the senior pastor, he left. And that's when I got my PhD and did the dissertation on EI as it relates to job satisfaction, organizational commitment. Well, then we moved from Michigan to Texas. I'm from Michigan originally. And then spent the next 3 years working for an assessments company, doing assessments for organizations, benchmarking top performers, leadership 360s. And for 3 years, flew around the country doing leadership team seminars, loved it. But we got bought out by a bigger company and got laid off. About 80% of us got laid off. So John, if you've never been laid off before, you got to try it. Right? It's been a great experience, right? But very growthful. But then that's when I became a director, worked at a behavioral health hospital. And then from there to doing this. So it's been a great, crazy career, but a fun career. And I've loved every bit of it.
What a journey. So thanks for sharing all that with us, how you became literally how you are now, and your company Becoming More. So that name, really, you get a sense of purpose and growth just from the name of the company. So, what does that mean to you personally, becoming more?
Yeah. So it's a participle, becoming. So it's an ongoing process, right? It never stops, right? So become a lifelong learner, and becoming more. It is somewhat subjective, where it's because everybody's like being successful. Like one of the greatest definitions of success I've ever heard was actually from an EI book, where it says success is the achievement of personal and professional goals, right? So whatever that may be, it doesn't mean that you're rich or anything like that. Just what are your personal and professional goals? But in order to do that, like with all three books, the journey of walking in, like to become more, has to do with the answer is walking into your own stuff first, your own weaknesses. So I want to be, everyone becomes what they want to, only some people think about becoming more. So the want to is simply our mental models are just always suggesting, here, Greg, say this, here, Greg, do this, but doesn't always work out, right? So the becoming more is I want to become more effective, more emotionally intelligent. And that more is an ongoing process where I have to debate my mental model and train myself to become, I want to become more than what I am. So one of my mission statements was like on the bell curves, right? To blow away the bell curves. That's my mission statement. But I don't want to compare myself to other people. There's on the bell curve of, let's say, being a husband, there are 100 Gregs, right? So there's 100 percentile Greg where I don't let myself off the hook. There's a guy at the top, right? That's Greg, and he's an incredible husband. So I want to become more, right? So whatever role you play as a husband, as a in your company, or as a father, whatever, we want to become more than what we are. That's where it comes from.
Yeah, right. God, well, that makes a lot of sense, and that constant, never-ending improvement as well.
Yeah.
So this I3 concept. So I just said it. Oh my God, because I just saw the word. I just said it. At Rise and Drivers.
Okay.
Greg and I spoke. Greg and I spoke before the interview, and the main thing was it's iCubed, and I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me because
Yep.
in my research I saw it all on the website, and I just said I3 because I just saw the
Yep.
word in the question I'm going to ask. Oh my God,
That's awesome.
So iCubed, everyone, and that really hits the point home.
Yeah.
iCubed. Can you tell us what your inspiration was for writing this series? But I guess let's start with the first one in the series, Greg.
So the iCubed, that's like simple technique, 3 eyes, right? So first, I was a math major in my undergrad before I changed. So I love math. So that's where the cube came from, and I had this vision, for 25 years now. And the iCubed principle is simply this, right? So that's the title of the book. I just thought it'd be cool. But matter of fact, the chapter where I explain iCubed is the last chapter of all 3 books. So it's kind of like the summary technique to apply all the psychobabble and leadership and stuff before that. So I liken the IQ process under like the Panama Canal. Okay. So it's information, interpretation, intensity. So the rule is that the first lock has to fill up before the second lock opens. Right. So it's a process. So the first rule is on information is that it is like, because I use this as a pastor, right? Because I'd hear stuff all the time, or we all hear stuff, but the rule is that it's illegal for me. I like using the word illegal. It's illegal for me to have any opinion, which is interpretation, or any emotion until I have all of the information. Right? So imagine, John, if that one rule was blessedly applied to our, everybody applied that one rule in our culture, our society, that it is illegal to have any opinion or any intensity, any emotion until we have all the information. It would change the world, right?
Yeah.
So that's one. But once that first lock is filled up and you hear the story, get all the side stuff, the second rule on interpretation, it has to do more with critical thinking, right? Because again, our mental, we're very committed to our own biases. We're very committed to our own mental model thinking, right? So the second rule is simply that ask yourself the question, is there any other way of thinking about it? Right? So like with leadership, when I work with senior leadership teams, we talk about strategy and everything else. But the last question I would ask them is, I said, okay, after they lay out the strategy, I would say, okay, imagine the Warren Buffett of your industry walking into the room right now, looking at your strategy on the board and vehemently disagreeing with everything on it. Where would they be right? Okay. So what I found is on the interpretation. So it's like just to, create, so there's negative, neutral, and positive, right? As we think about things. But we have to there's a negative way of looking at it, there's a neutral way of looking at it, and there's a positive. And what I found and work with clients is there could be several, 6, 7, or 8 sentences that all are true. They might be paradoxical in nature, might be opposite, but they're all true in the way to interpret it. Mm-hmm. So the key is to be just to keep your emotions at bay and to challenge your mental model. The key is to simply pick the person that would absolutely disagree with you the most and find out just where would they be right. We burn all of our emotional energy on where they're wrong, but burn your emotional energy on where they're right. Okay. So all the information, interpretation, the intensity, because I liken emotions, emotion is emotional energy. Emotion is energy. So that just kind of is a natural play out. Like in most cases, here's the key where emotional energy should come from the assessment of how impactful is the information. Like what bad happens if, on a scale of 1 to 10, how big of a deal is it? Right? What's the impact? But secondly, more importantly, is how much emotional energy do I need to respond to it? And in both cases, what do we find? Our emotional energy, especially the negative stuff, I call it inflated. If you call me a name, it's a 0.5, right? Or 1, or I need a 0.5 to respond to you. But I'm at a 6, 7, or an 8, right? That inflation is my issue, not yours. Because if I dump a 6, 7, or 8 of emotional energy on you, it's going to cause damage. I'm going to hurt. I'm not going to solve anything. I'm going to hurt things. So I say that at that point, when you see the inflation, you got to put down the microscope, because I'm examining you and what you did that was wrong. You got to put down the microscope and pick up the mirror. Right? Yeah. That's the key. Yep.
That's really interesting. Put down the microscope and pick up the mirror. So look at yourself.
Yeah.
And I know you talk about the power of negative emotions, and anger, fear, and sadness. These can be interpreted as negative emotions, but
sure.
What happens when we actually face them and pick up that mirror?
Yeah. So I liken it onto, so let me go through a couple of things first. One is that, everything we do is trying to achieve an emotional goal, which is a fancy way of saying I want to feel something. Let's say, for instance, I'm feeling thirsty, so I take a drink because I don't want to feel thirsty. Same thing, hungry and tired. Those are micro emotional goals. But in the periphery of our micro emotional goals are our macro emotional goals, right? Which is our quality of life. We're always in this process day in and day out of trying to achieve emotional. We want to feel something. The macro emotional goals, quality of life, as determined by standard of living, living our values, and fulfilling destiny, calling, and purpose. Okay. Yep. So the emotional goals are all good, but then we have to assess the paths we take to achieve those goals, right? So simple, if I'm stressed, I don't want to feel stress, but the path I take is to drink alcohol at 5 o'clock every day, right? So on this path, I achieve my goal, but it's just not, I use 4 words: rational, healthy, wise, and right. So the emotional goals are always good, but we have to assess our paths. That's one. Secondly is behind us, all of us, is the house of our hearts. And we're standing in front of our house. I'm standing on the front lawn. And before me are all the things in my life that are causing me negative emotions, like you calling me a name, right? I don't know why you're doing that, John, right? Right. So we're assessing these things. But again, what is the first blush response of all of us as humans when we have negative emotions? We burn energy examining the thing causing the negative emotion, right? Which I might have to address it, like say, hey, John, don't call me that. But again, if I'm at a 6, 7, or 8, that's where I say, put down the microscope, pick up the mirror, because I have to address this first. So we have to turn around and walk into the house of our hearts, right? And that's what it means to face negative emotions. They're not bad, because emotion is energy. There's good emotional energy and negative is not bad. It's just problem solving. But when we find this inflation of emotion, I find that there's 3 major reasons for it. The most common, that's so subtle, is we believe a lie about the situation, right? Like John meant that, or he doesn't like me. Or like somebody will say, I'll never get a job. And working with clients, just our frontal lobes would just stick out these statements that just aren't true. But I say, look, we have to be careful, because emotions don't produce themselves. They come from sentences in our minds.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
So
then we can't fix the lie, So that's
I've
the first
heard
one. Yep.
thoughts
Yep.
precede emotions. And so I guess that's what we're saying here as well. That's what's causing that emotion. And also that sometimes we believe those thoughts to be true, but often they're just made up stories and they're not true. And so I can hear a
Yeah.
bit of
The
that in what
story.
you're
Yeah.
saying there, Greg.
The stories to tell ourselves. Yeah. So that's the most frequent reason is we believe lies. So I just say we have to replace, we have to replace the lie with the truth. Now there's elements of it, like I'll never get a job. I could say like, look, if I'm honest with myself, I have to own it that I didn't try very hard in high school and college. So I don't know what kind of job I'm expecting to get. Right. But if I work hard, do this and that, learn a trade or whatever, I can be successful. So it's a matter of just replacing that untruth with what is true. And that produces the right amount of emotional energy interpretation in order to drive. Right. So I say that the rooms in the heart, like I use just, there's a lot of emotional labels, but I use insecurity, anxiety, fear, worry, anger, and depression. So like insecurity is the first room, and that's the one that reveals the most, right? But then there's anxiety. Anxiety's in the kitchen, right? And then fear is crouched in the hallway. Anger or worry is looking out the window. Anger is walking around the bedroom, and depression's in the bed, right? So the first room is insecurity, and insecurity simply is, I like telling the story. I worked at a hamburger joint when I was a kid, when I was 14. And believe it or not, John, I used to be a super sarcastic teenage boy. But you can call it girl, right?
I've got one of those.
I've matured, right? Exactly. So one time when I was working, we were all friends there. I teased this girl so bad one time I made her cry, right? Not only that, worse than that, as she's walking away, I yell out, "You wouldn't get so ticked off if it wasn't true." But it was a defining moment for me because I remember the moment I stopped. I was 14. I stopped and went, "Oh my goodness, Greg." So every time you get defensive or angry or hurt when somebody teases you, literally the only way for it to actually hurt is there has to be some truth to it. I mean, nobody yells lies to each other like, "Hey, John, you're a heroin addict," because they're foolish. But then I started like observing people and like, oh my gosh, if somebody really wants to hurt the feelings of others, there's got to be truth to it, right? Except for the your mama jokes. There's no truth to it, but right, it's just mama. So that was key. So the insecurity is something I don't like about myself, which is normal. Mm-hmm. The issue is not that. The issue is I don't want it pointed out or exposed. Yeah. Right? That's the key. So the key is to insecurity. Like when I worked with the teenage girls at the residential treatment center, or behavioral health hospital, one girl said, "Dr. Greg, she's pushing my buttons." I said, "Well, honey, sweet, uninstall your buttons." Right? The issue isn't that she's pushing them. The issue is you have buttons to push.
Right.
And then another gal said, "Dr. Greg, she just called me a B." And I said, "Sweetie, the issue isn't that she called you a B. The issue is you agree with her. You just didn't want her pointing it out."
Yeah, right.
Right. So I mean, they loved me there. So the key is on
telling it straight.
Yeah. So off the door, here's the key. This is the second reason for the inflation. There's a door off the room of insecurity that goes into the basement. And in the basement is the machine of identity, value, and worth. So you ever like the phrase of, "Hey, John, you're taking it personally." Well, what that means is the negative thing is you're taking it personally, which means the negative thing is impacting your value and your worth, and it shouldn't. So I go through a process where I want to get people free. Like when I say that the unlock the inner strength behind your negative emotions, and like all negative emotions are exposing something in you. I mean, it sounds negative, but this is the pathway to free yourself from the environment having so much control over emotions. And that's where I'm on a crusade where we just like my value and worth is not contingent. Like I don't need my wife to pursue me, validate. I want her to, but I don't need her to. My identity and worth is not contingent upon the environment. So the inflation comes from when I'm taking things personally, that it's inflated because I need my wife to pursue me. And then number 3 is off the corner in the basement, that dark, dingy cellar door of trauma. Okay. So there's big T trauma, the official stuff, which few people actually have. But then there's the little T trauma, which I swear every single one of us has, which simply means we go through a very difficult experience and it rocks us, like it like kind of steals something from us, like confidence or security or trust. So as we move forward and go through events, our mental model goes, "Oh my gosh, Greg, here we go again." And it scoops up that emotion from that past event and plops it. Right. So the inflation of emotion is the whole premise of unlock the inner strength, because it's exposing something in us. We have to walk into it and we become stronger. So the healing process, the building of resiliency simply means that I am stronger now than I've ever been. And I am, right? Because what I don't share is what started this whole thing is I had that IQ principle, but in 2011, after I left my first church, I was a pastor and a marriage counselor. I ended up having an emotional affair, right? Just I didn't do anything physically with the gal, but I just became way too relationally connected to her. And I was like, what is going on here? So I had to walk into that and face my junk, right? So getting real human real fast, but that's what it is. And that journey over the last 10, 15 years, where I can say I'm stronger now than I've ever been. I wouldn't wish that, of course, on anybody, but I'm stronger now than I've ever been. That's the healing process. And that's the journey I want to give people to free them.
And was that the inspiration for the iCubed for couples?
Yeah, well, honestly, I just kind of stumbled on that. Actually, no, the first book was that was the first book of iCubed, just straight. But then what was funny is I started doing, because I'm 55 and, learning curve on the social media stuff. Before I wrote these books, I was only on LinkedIn, right? Right. But I started doing social media, like videos to promote it. And I said, well, man, this same principle, I wanted to be, somewhat creative. And I thought, well, this same print, I could use IQ for couples. So I just kind of created this little banner and just started doing the same principles as couples. But then I was like, why don't I do like a series? Right. So one weekend I was at a conference and I had some extra time and I literally wrote 80% of my IQ for couples book at the conference. So I put that out. But then I always want to do, because the coaching is IQ for Leaders, which is the book that just came out, is my coaching executive, on that. So that's where it came from.
Yeah, I see. Well, there's a lot of principles that I'm sure are the same between intimate relationships and leadership. You want to call out some of them?
Yeah. Okay. So one is with the couples, it's similar to the individual, but that's the principle. I give tons of techniques for couples. Like half my caseload, I work with marriages. But then for the leadership, I kind of flip it, right? So the first book is unlock the inner strength behind your negative emotions, right? So we walk into them. The couples one is facing negative emotions to build intimacy. But I turn it on its head for leadership, and I say becoming more. I say, okay, IQ for Leaders, unlock the rage of your negative emotions against the obstacles of becoming more. You're like, dun, 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 right? So we take the negative emotions, and because the whole premise of this, when we think of leadership, we think of, I want to influence other people, right? The win friends and influence people mindset. But leadership is, this is what I say leadership is influence. I use the John Maxwell thing, so I'm part of that group. But leaders become leaders because what happens is leaders overcome obstacles everyone else only wish they could overcome. That's what makes them leaders. Leadership is influence, right? But what are the obstacles that we have to overcome first? They're internal. And right? So the internal obstacles, because leadership is influence. And there's formal leadership power, which is, position and knowledge and expertise, which is legitimate, but it can't be just that. True influence can't just be based in your knowledge, right? It's when we really want another human being to influence, man, John, how did you do that? How did you, basically it's become more. So I go through the first chapter is on becoming more. The second chapter of the leadership book is on the leadership becoming more quotient. So I always say that, look, when I'm coaching somebody, I say, look, if you can find me a book, an article, a quote, there's millions of leadership books, but I wanted to do a theory. I didn't just want to do just a piece of leadership. So I said, if you can find a book, a quote of leadership, that's not in this quadrant, this quotient, I'll buy you lunch, right? Well, I still have my money, right? So it's four things real quick. So I step back and say, okay, how does one human being influence another? Okay. Well, first one is IQ, right? So intelligence, right? So now we're born with that. We can't really change that, but I say we want to maximize our IQ through formal and informal education, be a lifelong learner, right? And I say there's PhDs walking around all over the place who don't have the formal PhD because they're experts in the field. The second way to maximize your IQ is through critical thinking skills. It's you learn biases and be very aware of biases because that trips up your critical thinking, subjective like the interpretation. But there's critical thinking skills like Bloom's taxonomy, if you're familiar with that. So that's IQ. But then secondly is so it's IQ, EQ, personality, and then the fourth one is spiritual development and destiny. So on EQ, which is emotional intelligence and personality, I literally say that I don't know how there could be any discussion of leadership without a discussion of personality. Right? So personality ran through the machine of EI equals your interpersonal effectiveness. Right? So I talk a lot about that because, I mean, we all know, John, that the statement of, people don't leave organizations, they leave supervisors.
Yeah.
Well, what does that even mean? Well, we know what it means. It means that the supervisor is a jerk, or she's a jerk, right? And what does that mean? The personality. So a personality that we have two ways to have weakness. One is we take our strength too far. Sometimes, Greg, you can be so or too, like I'm an extrovert, so I can be like the girls of the RTC would say, Dr. Greg, you're so extra. Well, I thought that was a compliment originally. Thank you. Right? That's not what they meant. I couldn't believe it. Right? So I can become too angry or too domineering or too passive or whatever it is. So in that leadership, that's what people just like grow, like become emotionally intelligent. We just can't be ourselves when the situation, and that's where situational leadership comes in. Right? So that's the interaction of personality and EI. But then I get into spiritual development and destiny, and that was I'm working with people how to develop their mission statement.
Yep.
Because I can't tell you how many, literally dozens and dozens of people had reached out to me for counseling. Because my favorite story is I had this two guys from Houston, Texas, where one was an anesthesiologist, one was a radiologist. They didn't know each other, but they both came to me at the same time, ironically. And they were both making like $300,000 plus a year. And what's the common statement? Say, I'm successful. I've done this and that, but I just stop and say, is this it? Is this all there is? And I know as soon as I hear that, they need purpose.
Yeah.
And I call it the Iron Man core, this inexhaustible source of energy, if you've seen the movie Iron Man, that just creates a new destiny, right? And that driving force. So I help them develop their purpose. They don't know what it is, but we all know like something down there, that is true leadership. True leadership, because I say every job ever, every technological advancement ever is either trying to solve a human problem or enhance the human experience. Right? So like, it's beautiful, but that's what we're looking for is purpose. I want to change the world. We all do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know that you speak about aligning personality with your mission and your calling, and you've spoken and you've touched on all of that just then.
Yeah.
So is there a way that leaders can discover that alignment? I guess it's really a matter of reading your book and doing the thinking. But what would your advice be for them?
So what I do is like, yes, by all means, get my book. Otherwise, Otherwise, if you don't get my book, you'll never discover it, right?
Well, I highly recommend you do. And as usual, it'll be in the show notes. It's available on Amazon and other places, and on Kindle, etc. But there'll be and audio as well. Do you read it, or have you got someone else reading it?
No, I didn't do the leadership one yet on Audible because it's like that's the kind of book that you can't just do Audible on that book. I mean, because I try and it's like. I don't do all the fluff stories, which they're great now, but I mean, it is meaty. Like if you read the introduction, I have a buddy who has another PhD and he says, my PhD, who has a PhD in organizational leadership, he goes, just FYI, this book is a hard read. I mean, it's meaty because I just wanted to get down to forget all the fluff here. But when I have somebody, what I do is like, when I say that every job, every technological advancement, and here's the key that one is, and again, I call this, I put a splinter in people's minds, right? The matrix thing where they just can't stop thinking about it. So one is that I found that every mission statement comes from our life experiences. Okay. So there you go. There's the splinter. But I say if in light of the fact of when you look at the world, there are millions of problems, right? But ask yourself the question, what is it about the human experience that you just can't stand? Right. And people say like poverty or sex trafficking or drugs or something, which, but go deeper, keep going deeper until you arrive at the reason why is like, this is how it flushes out, but it eradicates the human soul. right? That you get down to that level, because like mine is, I can't stand mediocrity. I mean, because of the eradicate, I mean, people who just said it's mediocrity. It's not just a criticism of them. It's they can't become incredible and change the world. So whatever it is. So I say that's where you begin. It's like, what is it about the human experience that you can't stand, and just keep digging until you come up with a mission statement is, you know what, my mission is to emanate connection, to be able to see every person I come across. So when they walk away from my presence, they feel seen.